So this is Chipacon, and welcome to Otherworldly, the Changing Times, Changing Worlds the weekly show. And we are here tonight with Starwolf, and I have decided, just for yucks and giggles, to talk about some of the wonderful things that, because I've known him for 20 some years, I've heard all these great stories, and I just thought that everybody else should hear some of them. We can all learn from other people's experiences. So,
experiment.
and as I had mentioned in the write-up of this,
experiments is right.
yeah. Starwolf is a shaman, and he's a witch, and he's a professional psychic, and he's a Reiki master, and what I find fun, metaphysical engineer and soldier of fortune. I made sure that Gretchen knew about it, because I know she too is a metaphysical engineer, although maybe not soldier of fortune. So I guess the time has come to turn it over to Starwolf and have him tell us things that may be useful to us as we continue on these strange paths we're on. And
maybe entertaining, hopefully.
Yes, we hope.
Where do I start? I've got 52 years of
I know. Begin. How did you get into? Start with, because some of the people may not have seen you before. How did you get into this? Back with from Slater and those.
Okay. That part is easy.
And before that, too.
Before that, I had my I had my first spirit encounters when I was in the single digits. Because, as you know, children under a certain age are very open spiritually because of the way the brain is constructed at the time.
So you're another one that got into the craft because it wouldn't leave you alone?
Bingo. So basically it started, I had to have been somewhere like 2 or 3 when I was constantly telling people about my adventures with an albino buffalo.
White buffalo calf?
No, a lot bigger than that. Adult.
All right, full size white buffalo.
Yeah.
Oof.
And I also had an encounter with what I consider the tutelary spirit of New Haven, a nighthawk, because we were, once again, it had to be the single digits because we hadn't left for Holland yet. And I was up on the roof with my mom because she was hanging laundry on the rooftop lines. And I had an encounter with a nighthawk that apparently wasn't there. Not so much communication as hello, and when I went to show my mother, that wasn't there. So basically the spirit world kind of has said, since I was in my single digits, hi, you belong to us.
As happens with Shaman.
Yeah.
Now, how was your mother's reaction? Did she try to squelch it, or did she support?
She had such a vivid imagination, Sean, which was her way of saying, be quiet.
Get a grip.
But yes, I'm definitely tied to New Haven because I was almost literally born on the table of a restaurant called the Old Heidelberg. It's a student place on Chapel Street in New Haven, where my mother would stop every day after work. She worked at Social Security, to get her little pony of beer. Long before we knew anything about fetal alcohol syndrome or anything like that. And she literally went into labor while she was there. Thankfully, it's only about 4 blocks from Yale, New Haven. So my dad actually got there before she did. Yeah, one of those weird ones. But I've been having encounters with New Haven since I was little. It's something to do with the geography of the place. If you've ever looked at it, New Haven proper sits between two, you think I've extended myself, between two large sandstone hills that both of which tear off in cliffs. This was where the Connecticut River used to enter Long Island Sound until something happened and it shifted about 20 miles to the east and is coming out where it does now. This goes back to the days when, there was like 5 miles of ice on top of this part of the world.
So you live in Innsmouth.
No, I just kind of, well, on certain levels, New Haven, because of its geography and because of a little thing called Skull and Bones and the Tomb, we do end up kind of the toxic waste dump of southern New England metaphysically, because everything flows down the ley lines to us and ends up in Long Island Sound.
I haven't plotted the ley lines where I am yet.
Because I do dowsing, I know where most of them are in the immediate area.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest one in Connecticut runs under the Connecticut River.
I'm out by Pyramid Lake in northern Nevada.
Okay. Well, that must be interesting.
It's a primordial lake, and yes, there have been incursions into my home.
Yeah. But those were my first spiritual encounters back when I was really little.
Mm-hmm.
And as I grew and matured, things damped down until adolescence because your brain is changing and the chemistry, and you become less aware as you grow older. And then a lot of things happened to me when I was in my early teens. Part of it had to do with getting my skull cracked at a place called by a Syrian rocket at a place called Kibbutz Masada back in October of 1973, which I still have a piece of my helmet in my skull. I was 14 at the time. Wrong place, wrong time. Can people hear me? Nod or wave if you can. Okay, that's good.
You still sound more muffled than you might, but
Yeah,
we
that's
hear
what I was thinking. You are a little muffled, but we are
Yes.
hearing you clear enough to.
Yeah.
I was
know
just
what you're
wondering if
saying.
Lois might be able to enhance it in the recording.
Hopefully. Let's see.
You sound
14
muffled, but my internet connection's also spotty.
Yeah, and it may be just this particular tablet is heading on its last leg. The new one is having a factory reset at a computer repair place not far from here. So if you hear any screaming coming from southern New England, that's me trying to reload everything into the new tablet. But let's see. Fast forward now, like I said, 14. A lot of things happened. Among the things, about a couple of years earlier, I discovered something called Fate magazine.
Mm.
Everybody remember that one? And I found the address.
I remember
say
Green
fake?
Egg and the Circle Network News. So
Fate was a mixture of occult and UFO and cryptid, and it came in this little paperback size magazine. It later moved up full magazine size that was loaded with ads and articles and places where you find things. And I had recently acquired a copy of Paul Houston's Mastering Witchcraft because I was a disaffected teenager. So what was I looking for? I was looking for power so that I could be feared, respected, and maybe get laid. Well, that's how I started, like most teenagers do.
Did that work out for you?
Not so. But one of the things I found in the back of the magazine where they had all the ads was an ad for a place called the Warlock Shop that was in Brooklyn. Now, at this point, we were living in Port Washington on Long Island. So as the crow flies, we weren't that far, but to get there by mass transportation, that was almost a quest of epic proportions, at least for a teenager, because I had to take the train into Manhattan, down to the Brooklyn Bridge, across, then up till I got um to where the Warlock shop was. I could tell you by dead reckoning, but I don't even really remember the address. I figured it out on looking at an atlas in the Port Washington Public Library. But there I was, with my copy of Fate magazine, my shopping list of herbs and things, and my nose pressed against the glass, and there was this big sign that said, "You must be 18 to enter." Because Herman was very, very scared of being arrested, because this was the 70s and he was very, very gay. But what happened was I kind of came in by the back door, and while I couldn't go in as a customer, I could go in as an employee. So my first teenage job was mixing the things you find in the magical formulary book, only, well, where it says parts, we were working by pounds. So my first job was for Herman Slater, under the table, unofficially, and paid in cash, most of which went to buy herbs and books and the odd class, because the Warlock shop was not large enough to fit classes. There are people who talk about how I learned this. No, they didn't. The Warlock shop, the only space they could teach would have been Herman's kitchen, which was about the size of a good-sized walk-in closet with appliances in it and a very small kitchen table. But that kind of got me in. I learned, I met a lot of people. Um, let's see. Going back, Lori Cabot, back when she was young and hadn't quite become the official witch of Salem. Isaac Bonowitz, Ray Buckland, and his wife, because they lived on Long Island, I found out, and they actually weren't that far from me. There were a bunch of others who would come in to buy things, because the Warlock shop and later the Magical Child was built on the idea of this. Well, the Warlock shop was small and packed, and the Child, when he later moved into Manhattan, down onto East 19th Street, which made it a hell of a lot easier to get to for my job. He moved there because it had space for classes, an actual work area where we could make the various powders and oils and potions in bulk, because what we used to mix like incense paste was a small commercial cement mixer. The good old days. So yeah, where it says for this incense, put in 1 part this, well, we determined that part meant pound. So you would put we'd start with a pound of saltpeter and then 5 pounds of hardwood sawdust, because that made the best incense base, and then whatever color we were going to make it, because there were colors for different incenses, powders, and it would roll for about 25 minutes, and then we would unroll it and lay it out on a couple of very large baking sheets and let it dry overnight. And then it would go back into a second cement mixer to break it up again, because it tended to set up in a block due to the saltpeter, but did have the advantage that stuff, you would then add whatever essential oils or herbs you wanted to, and it would burn it didn't not burn, if that makes sense. Just enough saltpeter to make sure that even under anything except torrential rain conditions, it would burn.
That's interesting. I actually have a, rock tumbler that I use as a ball mill that I could use for small batches of that kind of thing.
Yes, you could. Yeah, let it run for about 2 hours and everything will be mixed. Later on, when I was working in a injection molding plant, we used the exact same principle for mixing the plastic. But that was that was where I was in, like I said, my early to middle teens, and then when we went over the river and through the woods to Lower Manhattan, things got you got more people in because there was room for classes in the basement. There was a ritual area that one of my jobs was to clean it out after people used it. And I will say this, it wasn't just cleaning out the candle stubs and the incense burners and making sure the lamps were all in one piece. Because gods were a bunch of occult groups that did not know how to banish and cleanse.
Please do not get me started on that.
Yeah,
Leaving portals open.
bingo. I got one of those from last year, but that will come later. I'm trying to give you where I was. That was in my teens. And as I said, I spent some of my early teens getting stitched back together again. So if you ever see a picture of me as a child and a picture of me now, you realize my head is shaped differently. I had kind of a wedge shape when I was a child, and now it's oval because of where things were put back together again. Also the first time I died, but that's another matter. Coming forward to college. First year, nothing. Yeah, I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Second year, I had 2 roommates. They were from the Navajo reservation. They were they were interested in beer, cars, and girls, not necessarily in that order. But it was about October. I'd gotten my allowance. I'd gone out and I bought a book from a local author, Tony Hillerman, who was just starting to get famous back then. The latest Styx album, which was The Serpent is Rising. And I settled back into the room. They're off. It's, I think it was Friday night. And so they're off trying to score beer. And one of the things that really endeared me to them was the fact that I knew how to brew. So problem is everything was not quite ready at that point. It's amazing what you can do with fruit juice, raisins, sugar, and water. But we get a phone call, or I get a phone call. It's from their grandfather. And what he said was, if you see my grandsons, tell them to be careful tonight. The shapeshifters are out. And that I did not have to worry because they wouldn't hurt me. I don't know. Yeah, it's one of those that I didn't have to worry. They wouldn't hurt me. So,
Scary gods like you too.
yeah. Well, I'm heading for the Friday night meeting of the local wargaming D&D, mostly board type war games and Dungeons and Dragons group. We met Friday night and Sunday afternoon. And I am crossing, if anybody has ever been to Albuquerque, we met in the law library. The law school was separated from the main campus by the parking lot of the Bernalillo County Medical Center, where I'd already had an interesting encounter because the professor of primate anatomy was also the county coroner, and he required for extra credit, we had to witness an autopsy, which was fun and easily as nauseating as the opening of that old series Quincy was. But I am crossing the parking lot. It's dark. Moon is up. And a breeze starts playing with me. It's like I've got a dog. You know how some dogs, they'll high out and they'll come back and they'll sniff around you and they'll run ahead and wait for you. And it's like, okay, what is playing with me? A couple of weeks later, their grandfather came on because he felt he had a calling to teach me, which lasted till the end of the year when the tribal council said, he got ratted out by his grandsons who weren't interested in learning this stuff. And they threatened to effectively cut off his welfare payments if they continued to teach me. So I learned a few things. Mostly I learned what not to do, having left a few serious dents in the space-time continuum while I was experimenting with things like, the Simon edition of the Necronomicon, of which I have not one of the really high-end $1,000 leather-bound editions, but I've got one of the first generation cloth-bound, as well as several copies of oh my God, the paperback book edition that they put in every Walden book in the United States.
I have one of those.
Yes, I collect Necronomicons. This is getting off on a tangent. I have a photocopy of the Hall edition of the Necronomicon from the 60s. At the 1970s version, what they call the Simonomicon. And I have some ideas who Simon may actually be from the description he put in the book he wrote about the publishing of the Necronomicon. So I have my suspicions as to who Simon may actually be. I've also got I've got the Donald Tyson edition of the Necronomicon, as well as the obviously spurious biography of Abdul al-Hazred. I do sometimes teach a class, Practical Necronomicon, from work of fiction to magical path. What's also interesting is if you look at Lovecraft's notes, he first dreamt of the Necronomicon about the time Crowley was doing the Babylon working, which resulted in the channeling of the Book of the Law. I'm wondering if Lovecraft just kind of got caught on the periphery of that.
Yeah, imagine.
And the Necronomicon may actually be the Book of the Law. Talk about weird. But that's what happens when you hang out in the occult community in New York City in the middle to late 70s to early 80s. This was before I found the SCA. Mostly, though, using the Necronomicon as Simonomicon requires such an investment in materials, because it's like most ceremonial magic. It's not for poor people. It requires several years of study, meditation, and doing the rituals right. And you need things like fixed mercury, which is hard to obtain. I think that was the stuff they used to put in etch-a-sketches. I've got a little bottle of it somewhere that another employer of mine.
What did you call that?
Fixed mercury.
Fixed mercury.
I think it's the same material, like I said, because I know the stuff they used to put in etch-a-sketches had a mercury base.
Really? Okay, so I always knew it as extremely finely divided aluminum. But
they may have done that later, but because face it, once they found out just how toxic mercury was. The thing you want to do is hand it to a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Sketches a hammer. Time check. Yeah, we're doing pretty good. So that was as I said, that was my introduction basically to shamanism as practiced all over the world. Later, I found a copy of Dr. Harner's Way of the Shaman, which tied everything together. Excuse me, I need to look. Excuse me, I'm looking at the chat because I seem to have missed the comment. Come on. Okay. Mm-hmm. Just checking.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Running through the,
Yeah, running through the comments because, like I said, the Necronomicon has always been of interest to me. That's what happens when you start reading Lovecraft at 12.
It was the first work of what was claimed to be magic or witchcraft that I ever bought. And I happened to buy my copy at a witchcraft shop in Manhattan. Don't know the name of the shop. Who
Well,
knows? Might have been you and might have been there.
if it, one of the things I remember of the Magical Child was just how wonderful it smelled when you would walk in because they had an entire wall of just jars of herbs and there were incenses and powders and
Okay.
you could, so it's very much, it could have either been that or it could have been enchantment, which is a little bit further south.
It's hard to say. I was doing some wandering around on a weekend trip there and just happened to stumble across the place, saw a rack of the Necronomicon paperbacks inside the door, and really didn't go any further in the door in the store than that.
Yeah, but it was a wonderful old place. He had every seal you could find for Solomonic magic on this electric rotary display, like like they used to have in jewelry stores.
Yeah.
So you would basically go until you found, the fourth seal of Mars, and you would write down the number on the list, and you would give it to the guy behind the counter, and he would take it out in a little bag for you, all cast in pewter. I know
Okay.
most of them weren't cast in the appropriate metal, so hopefully they work.
I have no idea what the store was, but that was my time and place encounter with the Necronomicon.
Yeah, that could, like I said, it could have either been the child or it could have been enchantment.
Yeah.
Because the child was where you were able to get the big, cloth bound, or if you had $1,000 to spend, the leather bound vellum copies. There were only about 1,000 of those made.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, no, there were less of those. But with actual gold leaf embossing on the cover and the what they called the Elder Sign on the there and Necronomicon in big Gothic letters.
Mm.
It was fun. Met my second girlfriend there because Herman also owned a club next door that I could go into even though I was underage because he couldn't get a liquor license, but he could get a cabaret license. So the place was BYO, bring your own, and he would sell setups and things. So I'd be in there drinking my ginger ale, and that's also where I found out that one of my great uncles worked for the mob. You laugh, but I was sitting there waiting for my girlfriend to show up. This was later, so I was in college here in Connecticut at the time. And I was waiting for her to show up, and the local family representative came in to collect the weekly protection money, and it turned out to be an uncle of mine. He looked at me and are you Jimmy Zito's little boy, aren't you? And it was quite literally Uncle Vinny. Didn't have a cousin Vinny, did have an uncle. He passed a long time ago, unfortunately, in Dannemora prison, in Dannemora State Correctional Facility. But like most of my poppy's generation, he also smoked like a chimney. So, what killed him? Emphysema. Not fond of tobacco, it killed most of my family.
Mm.
But other weird things that have happened. Well, I'm going to go to one that happened last year. I went to a magical festival in Massachusetts last year. And they decided they were going to, apparently the group that runs it has some sort of deal with a fairy queen. So they opened up a gateway to the realm of Fae, and they left it open for the entire weekend.
There are treaty considerations that come into play there.
Yeah, I was glad I was sleeping at home because it was only about an hour and a half from my house. So it was kind of like, okay, now I see why I'm going home to sleep.
This is basically a flat invitation for the wild hunt to come through.
Right. Now it was August, so we might not have gotten the wild hunt. What we did get was lots of rain. It meant made absolutely no money because the reader's room was literally half a mile from where everything else was happening. So people did not go down to us because it was wet. Food was good though. I will say this, the kitchen staff they had did excellent. And they had enough that they were able to what's it called, to feed a diabetic who still has a rather healthy appetite. But one of the things I did when I went home the first night was I grabbed a bottle of tin sea salt, a bottle of poppy seeds, and a bottle of iron filings, and I just kind of very carefully sealed all the entrances to the room that I was working in.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was one of those, you're doing what? But what the heck? Their turf, their rules. Yeah, I poppy seeds are good for dealing with European undead and the more obsessive, compulsive members of the Fae community.
That's because of the
Yeah.
counting thing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
My
I
usual
remember
one is
you
actually a
giving
mixture of poppy seeds and flax seeds to make sure they not only have to count them, first they have to sort them, and then they have to
Oh.
count them. Yeah,
and I remember one night you gave a rather lurid description of what the finely powdered iron does.
oh yeah,
I think it sounds like gas warfare from the First World War.
yeah.
Yep.
To most of the Fae community, inhaling powdered iron is the rough equivalent of inhaling a blister gas.
Mm-hmm.
It will burn and blister the linings of their lungs. But if I have to do that, you probably have been doing something really, really naughty. As far as I know, we didn't lose anybody. But they also created a ferry path that led from the circle that they opened it around to where the main cabins were. I went up and down the regular road just in case. I do have a few unfriends in the otherworldly communities, so I didn't want to take a chance of running into somebody. Of course, I also had Schmitter with me, and his basic attitude is, "Yeah, I can take it." For those of you who have not met Schmitter, he is my staff. He's 5.5 feet of fire hardened crystal cap with a crystal at one end and a copper cap, another ashwood, inscribed with the Anglo-Frisian runes plus a bunch of Runevalder symbols to make him both he's a weapon, he's my walking stick, he's a magical battery, and he eats what he kills.
Well, that makes them easy to feed.
He's just this side of a great weapon, but I just assume not become that noticeable.
Did anything like get out that wasn't put back that weekend?
I'm not sure. I think the rain, because of the rain, it tended to brown things out. Because it started raining like late Friday night and was still coming down Sunday afternoon when I was packing out. So
Huh,
But it
that
very
may be the
definitely,
universe.
it was very definitely one of those where, and I know something was going on because when I first was trying to get there, the GPS went wonky and literally it was at the top of a small hill right over the Connecticut-Massachusetts line, but it took me, a, I later figured out that it literally spiraled me up the hill, the reverse of the way to actually get there. Because to get there, once you learned it, it was make a left, make a right, make a left, you're there. But it had me go straight up, and then I spent most of it going up and down and up and down and up and down hills, and I finally found the place. That was weird, and it really felt like something was trying to keep me from arriving. Maybe because I had a container of iron filing system.
Could be.
Well,
Think maybe.
the toolkit that I normally carry in my pocket, it has a small vial of powdered iron along with, there is black sea salt, white sea salt, bottle of mixed poppy and flax seeds. These are all little like 10 gram vials tucked into the loops inside of the pocket. There is also what I call my hex breaker powder, which is a mixture of sea salt, powdered iron, rosemary, garlic, and a small amount of powdered silver that I basically shave off of a actual silver quarter when I'm making a batch. So if that will basically short out anything it hits. I also wouldn't want to get it in the face. But other strange things that have happened. Well, let's see. There was exorcising my wife's boss. That was a weird one.
I love this story.
That would
Oh, yeah.
have to be a weird one.
My wife's boss was, she was a problem. And we determined through divination that there was, she had a parasite, as it were. Later, we determined she was the parasite, but that's another matter. But because of the Nepali Tibetan shamanic tradition I'm trained in, I can do a long distance exorcism. So basically, I have this rainbow string, which represents the rainbow bridge. I cut a figure called a luai out, or loai, out of cardboard. You can also make them out of straw or paper mache or something. So it was connected. One end of the string was connected to Kathy. Another end was connected to the iron column that in our basement that I use as to represent the world tree. Because that's another thing that will ground anything out, because it's iron filled with concrete and goes 4 feet down into the ground. That will ground anything.
That is
So,
one hell of an Axis Mundi you've got there.
It's only gotten better because I've added all sorts of large tachyon cells which focus, and part of the house's defense in depth. But I did my ceremony. I chanted my chant, which is, I'm not going to do it, but it goes to the tune of Lui Lui, only because it made sense. Cut the cords, wrapped it, put it in the thurible that is on my altar, which is an old cast iron wok, and I'm not sure why anybody would make a wok out of cast iron. We got it as a wedding present, and I appropriated it because we had a decent, one of those hand hammered steel woks you get at the Big E. But I put it in, I lit it, and you would have thought the thing was made out of gun cotton. I'm talking, now there were a few bits of old candles in the bottom of the thurible because I want to make sure it burned, but we got a 3-foot column of flame coming up out of the thurible. You would have thought there was gasoline in there. And you swear you could hear things in the flames. You know how sometimes flames make sounds like voices and they're crackling. Well, this one was definitely crackling and moaning. So, and it was getting a little close to the rafters. So, first thing I do is I take out the spray bottle of war water that I keep on the altar for just such an emergency, start spraying at it, and I basically making warding symbols with my card, which is a traditional, it's used in Tibetan Buddhism, but it's also used as a tool of exorcism by Bon shamans. And you could watch the flame kind of towering away when I would gesture at it, and I could spray and gesture. Once time, twice time, can't say, give it a third time, and it goes out, and we have the most god awful stench in the basement because there is this weird grayish black smoke that you should not be getting out of a piece of cardboard and a couple of meters of cotton string. But for the next couple of months, my wife's boss left her alone. Later, we found out she was part of one of those evangelical churches which invite angels into people. So who knows? The exorcism did not work twice. I've discovered that one of the things I've discovered is that you sometimes you need to come up with different ways of doing things. So the next thing I did was mix up some hot foot powder and had her seal the entrance to her office with some of it. And it was interesting. Apparently, her boss would come down trying to basically yell at her for things she actually hadn't done or things that she had done because that's the way the state required it, not the way the boss wanted it. And she would stop and get this quizzical look on her face and turn around. Kathy eventually retired, so she is no longer part of our lives. That was one of the weirder moments. It took about 2 days to get the stink out of the place. And it wasn't sulfur, it was smelled like burning petrochemicals.
It sounds like it almost sounds like an oil refinery fire
It smelled
with the heavier stuff going up.
It smelled kind of like Newark.
Sounds like something I read about in the roll right ritual when they tried to summon an undine.
Oof.
Yeah. Also, when I was spraying it with the war water, the flame was screaming. That could have just been steam, but at the same time, it's like, what's going on here?
Well, whatever it was, it seemed fire-based and was highly combustible.
Yeah. I got more. I think this is a case of we got more energy out than we put in, and if I could figure out a way to control it and reproduce it.
Yeah.
Solve your heating
Tell
problem.
us about some more of the things you built with your tachyon things and
Tachyon cells
crystals
and
stuff.
crystals. Okay, let's start with one of the more generally useful ones, the psychic shield that I built. And I still will build them for people until I run out of those little black project boxes from the now defunct Radio Shack. It basically is designed to soak up and ground out negative energy. So if you're carrying one, what you've got, the basic design is you have a switch, 2 capacitors, and a quartz crystal wound in a coil. Now I add a few other things to that. I add, along one end, I add alternating jet and amber beads, because that turns it also into an energy converter as well as simply a shield, because what it does then is it soaks up negative energy. The combination of jet and amber converts it to positive energy and feeds it back to you. So the idea is the harder they hit you, the stronger you get. It's one of my favorites because,
Imagine it's like psychic impact armor.
Kind of.
I am so going to have to build one of those.
You can get a copy of any of Smith's books from Llewellyn on crystal technology. The basic design is in there. I've got my own variations, including the one I normally carry, which also has, as part of the circuit, a large hematite ankh for just in case.
I'm pretty sure I could adapt one of G. Harry Stein's designs and do
Could be.
something similar.
Could be. It's one of those devices that it's relatively simple to make. And if you bother to steal a belt clip off of a cheap dollar store tape measure, you can make it so you can clip it onto your belt or inside your coat pocket. Another variation I built on that one is a cloaking device, which has the same basic principle. I use smaller crystals. I also use a combination of barite roses, which have gotten to be small ones have gotten hard to find. I still have 4 or 5 left. And what they call Apache gold, which is a mixture of black soapstone and pyrite. The idea of that one is it doesn't make you invisible. I've never been able to do that. It does make you hard to notice. Do not wear this if you are turned on, if you are standing in line at a fast food restaurant, or you will never get served.
I did something similar with
Yeah.
Franz Bardon's initiation into hermetics. He has a meditation for invisibility that I charged a quartz crystal with. It worked so well, it really scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, I've also got a bit of Apache magic that does the same thing. The trick is not so much turning the stuff on, it's learning how to turn it off. That's the bit that a lot of these books don't teach you, which is why whenever I build something out of crystals, I automatically put a switch on, even if it's only symbolic. You have your on position and your off position.
I think that goes back to the one of my favorite bits out of Doctor Strange is the warnings come after the spells.
Bingo. That is one of my favorite ones.
Yep.
The warnings come after the spell. Oh, goody. But, or there is also a line from one of Lovecraft's, from Case of Charles Dexter Ward, do not call up that which you cannot put down again.
I drew a cartoon for that.
Face it, it's one of the things I have discovered is that the line between stable metaphysical energy vortex and screaming rip in the fabric of reality is a very thin one and sometimes gets erased. As I said, when I was a teenager, I was some serious dents in the fabric of space-time around Albuquerque, New Mexico, in which case I apologize.
Oh,
Most of them should have healed by now.
I did something
yes,
in
this is the word of power.
I did something in the San Fernando Valley, Yule of 1993, that came to fruition in January of 94 that I have recently stopped apologizing for.
Yeah.
93, last time I was in California was in the late 70s, because when I was going to school in New Mexico, it was easier for me to go visit my grandmother in LA than it was to come back to Connecticut. But let's see, other things I've built out of crystals, crystal wands, which are, you take a piece of copper. A lot of what I do looks like plumbing because you use copper tubing. One of my friends says, what is it about men and building things out of copper tubing? It just works so well with it. Pardon the scratching. I'm dealing with a serious allergic attack, and it's getting better now. But your basic crystal wand, as I make it, you take a piece of copper tubing, you put an end cap on one end, you place a one of those connectors that allows you to connect a larger to a smaller tube.
Yeah.
That will get glued together, and then you find a crystal that fits into whichever end is pointing out of the connector. Shim it in place with leather if you have to. Apply your super glue or your epoxy. Note, when working with crystals, use the longest setting epoxy you can find. As epoxy cures, it generates heat. Crystals do not like heat. It tends to make them go bang. As I discovered when I used 5-minute epoxy and made the mistake of applying an accelerator.
You don't want all that heat coming at once.
Yeah, because it
over
makes it
time.
vibrate, and if the crystal has any flaws, wink, they break. That was back when I was trying to make lead sling bullets with crystal cores. That didn't work either. But once you have that, you take an insulator. I tend to prefer either parachute cord or the stuff they call rat tail that you find in a clothing store, the kind of satin cloth.
Yes.
You can also use leather strips. I made one where I actually got a can of what they call Dip It, which is a rubber compound used for
Tool handles.
Tool handles, yes.
And have basically, I've dipped that. Works reasonably well.
Mm.
The idea is this is a device for focusing energy. Or as you could call it, it is a hand-carried particle accelerator. That's what Michael Smith called them in the first book. I think that was Crystal Power. He has a bunch of them. They're somewhere down in the basement. I really should bring them to the next Changing Times because, well, do a class on building things out of crystals again.
I'm just thinking this would make a hell of a class for Changing Times.
Oh,
as
yeah.
Just metaphysics, hands-on. Let's build some stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I did that once at a Beltane where I pre-cut most of the stuff, and because I have 10-pound bags of quartz crystals sitting in the basement because that is who I am, I brought a couple of bags of crystals and let people pick their crystals and set it up and then wrap the shaft. I did have to have a fee for that one because I was out of pocket for the copper and the crystals and the various bits and pieces.
I'd love to see something like, schematics and a list of, here are parts you can put here in this spot that says power focus.
Part of the problem is with the demise of Radio Shack, a source of components for the little capacitors and the project boxes, as they used to call, which are those black plastic boxes they sell.
Full of parts.
Oh yeah, bought enough of those.
I stockpiled some of them. I've still got half a dozen left, but once those are gone, they're gone. Because Radio
I'd
Shack
love to see maybe a show and tell then with a talk about what kind of parts go where, and
I can
people could figure out what they could use.
I can definitely do that.
Yeah.
So that's one of those are some of my more obvious ones. I mean, I also went through a period where I was, fastening crystal matrices to swords and things, and I still sort of do that. I just haven't had a need for any. I've built everything I need, and the problem is December 12th, 2012 came, or December 21st, 2012 came and went, and nothing happened. We had a bloop, and nothing happened. It was one of those, okay, the gods did not return, Atlantis did not rise, the mothership did not return. Oh well.
Yeah.
I spent an awful lot of time preparing for something that didn't happen. Which makes me wonder if I fell afoul of the great god Heisenberg, and by observing, I changed the outcome.
Yeah, I think that about nails it.
Hate that. And that is why for some of my devices, I have put in a notch filter to cut down feedback.
Yeah,
But, you know, that whole
quantum
cycle
mechanics,
thing.
the dirty little bar where magic and physics meet, and physics looks embarrassed.
Mm.
Simply, and magic tends to wink at it and offer to buy it a drink.
Come here often? Yes.
Okay, we're
Uh,
getting close to the end. I was wondering if anybody else had things they wanted to contribute. Have you taken, are you following the logic he's of what he's saying, and are you
well, definitely, but I have.
I have a fistful of ideas now that I'm going to go
Mm.
tinker with.
And yes, I wish Radio Shack were still around, because the idea of taking discrete components and a simple
yeah.
schematic, and then you wire wrap quartz crystal with a coil, and I see one of the most interesting inductors I've ever thought of.
That's why people like us saved old televisions and computers and
By the way, the little RF chokes they used to sell,
Yeah.
those made wonderful coils for doing what amounted to a stack.
Mm.
Mhm.
Nice thing about those is they're easy to wind.
Well, no, these were pre-made.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Pre-made for you to wire.
Yes, but if you can't, to invert the old phrase, if you can't do store-bought, homemade is fine.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Well,
And
I would love to learn more about how to do these things. And
Yeah, so would I, definitely.
Yeah.
And the idea of being able to just learn,
Like
say,
I
all right,
said,
well, you
find
do
a
these,
copy
especially
of Smith's Crystal Power.
Mhm.
crystal power.
It's way out of
Yeah.
print. It was Llewellyn from back in the late 70s through the middle 80s. He had a whole
Okay.
series of them.
We've probably seen the book.
You'll probably find it through Amazon for
See,
some ridiculous
2
amount.
shelves down and 3 shelves over. Yeah, there it is.
The Crystal Power, there were like 3 or 4 of them, and they kept building on, including stuff you could wire into your computer, because the last one came out just as the home computer revolution was starting.
Hmm.
So there's a picture of some of his stuff wired up to, I think,
On Amazon.
an old Vic 80.
Vic 80?
Okay.
Okay, that is old.
Yeah, we might have stuff around here we could use.
Yeah,
yeah.
the basic materials you can find at any hardware store, and I would suggest buy a tubing cutter. It makes it a lot easier than
Oh,
go.
got one of those somewhere.
Yeah.
Or
Got
used to.
one. I just get out my plumbing bag, which has one.
I have a tubing cutter specifically for doing that, because it's
Mm.
amazing how many crystal wands you can get out of a 6-foot length of 1/2-inch copper tubing.
Have you done anything with the oh, it's glass rods that are they were for putting energy through. I had a wand made out of that, and my goodness, that worked beautifully.
Built a bunch of orgone type devices.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I like that.
Putting
Yeah,
energy
good
through
Lord.
what?
That I think had to do more with Reiki. Well, at least I've got the pictures of it. It amounts to a test tube stuffed with steel wool and cap that was used for inserting orgone energy into a body.
No.
Where I leave
Okay, we're getting uncomfortably close to alien probing here.
Yeah, really. Just don't bend over to pick up the soap. That's all. You know. Just,
remember,
I seem to remember fiber optic
Reiki
rods
is
at
not
some
just
point.
an energy worker. Actually, downstairs in the basement, I've got a baby version of his Cloudbuster, which I will definitely try to bring to Changing Times so people can see what got him thrown into jail.
Mm.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
We have used up our hour, and I think we should let I believe you have your dinner at 9, so we should let you go.
Yeah.
Bye-bye, everyone. I will
And
see you
I'm going
later.
to stop the recording.
We need to figure out
and-
what happened with